Hello, hello, hello. Listen, I am so excited. I am a firm believer that what God ordains, He will sustain. And I tell you, He has done just that. He's connected me with some amazing women to share the mic with. And I'm so thankful. Today is no exception. I'm excited to share the mic with Dr. Ma'am, please introduce yourself and share with us what it is that you do.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Marsha. Well, my name is Dr. Ijeoma Nwaogu. I am an inspirer, an educator, and a coach. I inspire folks to do what they're inspired by so together we can make the world better. So that certainly is my life's work and my passion. I'm also a coach, a leadership coach. So I walk folks through the process of getting unstuck or helping them to craft goals for themselves. Oftentimes I see clients who are dealing with imposter syndrome. I want to say that a lot of clients come to me with one concern, but then the underlying issue seems to always boil down to imposter syndrome. And I find that so fascinating. So, luckily, I study imposter syndrome. I write about imposter syndrome. So having that insight is certainly helpful when I coach my clients. So just someone who's very passionate about leadership development and personal growth. I value talent and compassion, diversity. Freedom, to me, is the ultimate goal that we're all trying to achieve. I value wisdom and authenticity. So that's a bit about my values and the work that I do.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. I love it. I love it. I love it. Now, I do know that you talk about your leadership coaching and consulting firm. And one of the things that stuck out to me was the college life coach. Mm-hmm. And I know, as a mother of a young adult, and a lot of our listeners are mothers of young adults as well. Before we jump into, I know we spoke a little bit about imposter syndrome, which is our real talk topic for today. I wanted to just ask if you would share with us, as we find ourselves in this very challenging new normal, so to speak, what advice are you giving, or how are you encouraging students to make the most of this new normal as we find ourselves making adjustments to what transition looks like right now?
Sure. One thing I know about human beings is that we are adaptable. One thing I try to encourage my students, they get really bogged down and depressed and anxious because they've never seen anything like this before. It's very shocking. Like, people experience something like this once in a lifetime, and they're young and they're experiencing this. And, they had these internships set up and those got canceled. And so they're wondering, do I have the competencies needed to be successful during college and even after college? But I always try to help them know that they are capable, they are resourceful, and they are whole, no matter what they're going through or what they're thinking. Once they have that understanding about themselves, they can begin to look within and tap into their creativity, tap into their skills to do what it takes or to create a new plan for themselves. It's possible, but I think people just get stuck in their fear and anxiety, and it kind of cripples them from taking action. But we are certainly capable of coming up with a new trajectory for ourselves and implementing that. People just need kind of guidance and support and a cheerleader and a champion to help them get to that place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. Tap into what is within. And I think that's so critical where we find ourselves right now. Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing. Okay, so we're going to talk about our real talk topic, and you've alluded to it, some as we've opened up. And I just want to kind of pull back the layers of what it means when we talk imposter syndrome. And, sure. And of course, that's not necessarily a medical or clinical term, but it's something that we all have had some experience in. So if you would just take a few moments, take a few moments and share with us what imposter syndrome is.
Yeah, and I think you kind of alluded to some important factors that I want to share about. So imposter syndrome, that's kind of the mainstream understanding or term that people use. I like to refer to it as imposter experience. Yes, I sometimes say imposter syndrome because that's what people understand it as. But I like to call it imposter experience. One, because the word syndrome kind of has this clinical connotation to it. It's not a psychological disorder. It's not a mental disorder. You can't diagnose someone as having imposter syndrome, but that word syndrome kind of has that feel to it. So imposter syndrome is a common lived experience. It's something that most people, if not all of us, will encounter at some point in our lives or another. So because it's so common, because it's so familiar, that's why I like to use the word experience, because it's very normal, right? So what imposter syndrome is, it's a persistent fear of being exposed as a fraud. You're afraid of being, quote unquote, found out as someone who doesn't belong, someone who's not deserving, someone, who is not competent. So you're afraid that other people will see that you're not supposed to be here, right?
Right.
So there's that fear and self-doubt. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, Marsha, but I remember a time in my life when people used to give me so many compliments, like, oh, Ijeoma, you're a great speaker. Oh, you're great at this. You're great at that. I never believed them. Right. I never did, because I didn't believe it for myself. I thought I was an imposter. I thought I was a fraud in that space, that I didn't belong there. I thought people were much more competent than me. And I just didn't believe them. I thought they were just trying to be nice. So that's another characteristic of imposter syndrome, where you're not believing the compliments and the feedback that people are giving you when it's good, right? So some people find it hard to see their value, or they dismiss their success as that was good luck, good timing, not because of anything that I did. It's just I got lucky, right? So imposter syndrome, people say, well, does that mean you're not confident? So that's the tricky thing. So yes, it has to do with confidence, but to a certain extent, right? So you could be a very confident person. Overall, you feel that you certainly have the skill sets needed to thrive, right? But imposter syndrome is very contextual. You have to be in certain situations, and then, certain situations will trigger that feeling. That doesn't mean that overall you're not a confident person. It's just in that space, and however you're thinking about that space or processing that space, you get challenged with self-doubt. Okay. So, you could just to summarize, you can be a confident person and still deal with the imposter experience. Just want to be clear about that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, because it's so true. It's like we just talked about, it's a deep-seated belief of not being good enough. And it really is kind of, I want to loosely use the word triggered based off of where it is that you are when you talked about that particular space. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have this confidence, but if whether or not you're, in a boardroom, or you're on a new job, or, whatever that task is that you're dealing with at that time, you have those feelings that this shouldn't be happening because I'm not good enough. I don't deserve it. Who am I fooling? Who do I think I am to be here? Oftentimes I hear, I just, this space, I just don't belong here. I don't, how can I possibly pull this off? Am I going to say the right thing? If I don't say the right thing, will they find out that I don't belong here? So that was great. That was awesome. Yeah. So you kind of gave some insight into some of the characteristics. If you would just kind of pull those layers back a little bit more in terms of what are the characteristics of imposter experience? I love that.
Sure. Yeah. Characteristics. Well, I will say that depending on your social identity and your personality, or any other kind of demographical characteristic of yours or your social identity, it does influence how you experience it. So I'll give you an example. With personality, at least, you have extroverts, you have introverts. So extroverts can certainly deal with imposter syndrome. And some people are like, they're not shy. Of course, they like people. Why would they have imposter syndrome? But anybody could experience it, So let's say an extrovert, they have to give a class presentation. Because they feel like imposters, they may talk too much to try to compensate for the fact that they don't think that they know much, right? And then when you look at an introvert, they may shrink and hide their bodies, like kind of pull their heads down or pull their shoulders in or not say as much because they don't want to reveal that they don't belong. So depending on who you are, your nature, your temperament, these imposter behaviors will show up differently. Some people may talk too much. Some people may not talk at all. So there's not just one set way of identifying, someone dealing with imposter syndrome. So your other question was, what was the other part of the question?
Well, I really liked, I think, we talked about the characteristics or some of the characteristics related, but I love how you just pointed out the nonverbal indicators, because I think we don't pay attention to those. And even as an individual, you're not looking at those nonverbal indicators of what it is that you're experiencing internally. And so I love that the idea that you brought that to the surface, and then the social identity and the personality, because I think a lot of times we don't take the personality aspect into consideration when we're, even looking at how people communicate, how they interact with one another, those verbal and nonverbal clues, all of that can be shaped, by those various domains and those life experiences that we've had, whether it be, social identity, culture, personality, all of those kind of shape who we are and how our behavioral patterns kind of come into play. So I think that was awesome in identifying that, because I think it brings, for me, it's like that aha moment, like, oh, okay, that makes sense now.
Yeah.
I get it. I absolutely get it.
Sure.
That's good.
Yeah.
So, we talk about how a lot, most people at some point in their lives, some stage in their lives, they experience imposter syndrome or have the imposter experience. And so it's definitely, I don't want to say normal, but normal. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very normal experience.
Right. Yeah. And so it shows up and it appears in different ways. And you kind of, gave some indication to that as well. And as it relates to perfectionism or superwoman syndrome, when we're talking about women, I am a identified superwoman. I think I do have had some experience with perfectionism as well. And so I think it's critical to, say, hey, we're not alone. You're not alone. If you found yourself saying, shaking your head up and down, like, yeah, that makes sense now. I get it. I get it. It's something that we've all kind of encountered at some stage or in our lives. So what are some of those internal, external factors, if you will, that can contribute to the deep-seated belief pattern that we experience?
Sure. Okay. So there are definitely some internal and external factors as to why imposter syndrome happens. So many things. So competitive environments, right? If you're in a space where people are trying to one up each other and outdo each other, and you have that mindset, you're never going to feel like you're enough, because you're on this hamster wheel of trying to be better than someone else. And we all know that that's exhausting and it doesn't leave you feeling good. So that is another setting or environment that can trigger imposter feelings. And then unmet expectations. You might have these expectations of yourself, which goes along the same lines of perfectionism, and you maybe don't meet them in the time frame that you wanted to achieve these goals. And then you start thinking about yourself as someone who's incompetent or incapable of achieving these goals. And then a lot of people deal with imposter syndrome because they have limited experience in their work or in whatever space they're in. So if you're a novice or you're entering a new job and you don't have enough knowledge, certainly you can have these imposter thoughts and feelings. Or you might be dealing with exclusive behaviors. If you're in a workplace and people are not being inclusive of you or inviting of you, you may feel like you don't belong. Like, I'm not supposed to be here.
Right.
People don't even want to, engage with me or invite me out when everyone else is invited, or value my work or anything like that. And also, I would say one of the main major underlying reasons that trigger imposter thoughts and feelings has to do with negative self-beliefs. Mm-hmm. It could be traced from childhood. My story is when I was about 12 years old, a beloved adult figure berated me and called me stupid because I couldn't recall a particular situation. Mm-hmm. So I just, carried that word stupid with me, not realizing that had kind of harmed me emotionally. Right. But it would certainly show up when it was time to perform. So when I was in graduate school, when I was in a space where, you really had to showcase your talent, that's when those thoughts surfaced. Like, oh, you're stupid. You better not say anything. You better not show up because everybody's going to see that you're a fraud. You don't belong here. You shouldn't say anything. Put your hand down. Yeah. I didn't engage for the 2 years in my program. These 3-hour-long classes, I stayed silent. I did not dare open my mouth. Wow. And my classmates would be raising their hands left and right. And I'm looking to my left, looking to my right, and just shaking in my boots because I was so scared to engage in dialogue because I didn't even realize that this childhood experience showed up when it was time to perform. So yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I mean,
no, I was done.
That was so good. And I wanted to, I guess, jump in and ask, when did you get to that point where you realized like, okay, so I'm pulling back the layers and I can identify that it was that particular occurrence that kind of shaped how I viewed myself?
Yeah, it wasn't even until after my graduate program. I didn't even really have time to sit and reflect. It was maybe a year after. And I was like, you know what? Why did I not show up authentically? Why did I not take charge of my own experiences? Why didn't I raise my hand in class? And I remember one day just sitting down, just writing it out. And I was learning more about imposter syndrome. And I was like, that's what I was dealing with. I didn't know how to name it back then. When I was experiencing it, I didn't have the language. I didn't know it exists. I just thought something was wrong with me. And over time I started learning this is a very common experience. Right. That most people, again, if not all people, will encounter. And there's some science. There's some science behind the imposter experience. I'm going to see if I could kind of break it down for the audience here. So, humans, we're hardwired with this survival instinct or this self-preservation instinct, right? So our biology always wants to protect us from real physical dangers and harm, right? Like our body will do this fight, flight, or flee thing that people talk about when it senses danger. Right. And, this mechanism in us, this predisposition, is helpful when we're in real danger, right? But it's misleading because it can also drive us away from new ventures that could potentially bring us joy and fulfillment in our work or a sense of achievement. So this same predisposition is a byproduct, or the imposter experience is a byproduct of this survival instinct that we have, right? So the imposter experience, the fear that it senses is being exposed. Right. To be exposed is the danger or the harm that is trying to prevent us from tapping into. So it senses that, oh, you're in a new environment where you could learn and grow. No. You need to. Yeah. So that's what the safety instinct is telling us, but it shows up as imposter syndrome. So that's why I say it's such a natural biological experience because we all have that human self-preservation instinct that's simply just trying to protect us from harm. But then it gets confusing because it interprets everything as harm. Right. When new ventures or, speaking up in class, that's not dangerous. That actually allows you to tap into your greatest potential. So I think identifying that when the imposter thoughts and feelings show up, just being able to recognize, oh, this is my safety instinct. It's okay. And I'm not going to interpret it as danger. I'm going to interpret this as something I need to walk into. So I think we have to have that self-talk and knowledge in identifying that it's simply our self-preservation instinct And that'll help us to be more compassionate with ourselves rather than like, beating ourselves up. So I think we could view like this negative self-talk or whatnot as a separate entity. If we view it as a separate entity from ourselves, we could talk to it and say, I got this. Don't worry. I got this, and have compassion for it rather than trying to fight it. Right. There's a lot of language out there that's like, beat imposter syndrome, tackle it. Like all that is so hostile and unnecessary because we all have this wiring. So why would you fight something that's just simply trying to protect you? It's up to us to control it and say, no, I understand. I got this. Don't worry.
Absolutely.
This is safe and I got this, and we should walk into it. So, and one way of identifying that, what I would call inner disruptor, the voice is persistent, it's harsh, it's fearful, it's judgmental, and most importantly, it's inaccurate. It's inaccurate. So when we identify that it's inaccurate, that's when we could, say that, okay, I got this. Don't worry.
Absolutely. I got this. Yeah. I got this. And I love the fact that acknowledging the fact that negative self-talk is misleading. And that's all I could hear is like, it's misleading. It's inaccurate. And I think when you get to that place where you can identify it and you can begin to use the cognitive restructuring and reframing, that self-talk, you can find yourself being able to navigate it. One, identify it quicker, you know what I'm saying? So that you're not like going through this thing and, 2-3 days, weeks later, you're like having this aha moment. But to me, it seems like it comes quicker because you are more intentional about your thoughts and what you're saying about yourself and to yourself. And that comes with that whole self-compassion. And you are making the right comments as it relates to, I want to say, what's the term I'm trying to use? I guess, making the right moves in terms of showing yourself love and being able to identify, okay, this is where we're at. How do we address this? How do we begin to operate in emotional regulation so that we can look at this and say, okay, I see you fear, but this is how I respond. Not how I react, but this is how I respond.
Yes. I was just about to say that, how we respond. Right. That's great. And one thing I even tell people, I say, if the imposter syndrome shows up for you, that is a good thing, because that tells you that you're involved in something great, big, and awesome. Okay. If it doesn't show up, that's when you should be like, hold up. Am I challenging myself? Like, am I involved in something that's going to grow me? So
that's good. That's good. That's so good. And I think that's almost how you kind of flip it, again, that whole reframing of it. You're just like, okay, so this right here is causing me to think, okay, so I need to dig deeper and I need to push harder and, be able to reframe this and get it into the right terminology to benefit where I'm going and not where I am. And I love that. Yeah, I absolutely love that. So, of course, we talk faith, we talk mental wellness here. So I wanted to ask, what role did mental wellness and your faith in God play in shaping your ability to navigate the waters of imposter experience?
Sure. Yeah. And I am a person of faith. I consider myself a Christ follower. I'm someone who's very reflective and spend time talking to God. And I understand that we are all made in God's image. And so with that understanding, you start, well, if we're made in God's image, God is not an imposter. So neither should I be, if God made me, he made me capable, he made me whole. And I should tap into that. So, I think as I was reflecting that year later, I always incorporate my understanding of the Bible and what it says about our identity and who we are. So I think that will always, play a role in how I walk and how I think. And then with the mental wellness piece, someone who I studied counseling for my PhD. So and I just been in the world of helping services, right? So where I'm understanding human behavior. And so as I continue studying all this stuff, I think about it for myself. I think about, my goal is to always be better. So what will help me be better and clear-minded and mentally well, and all of that. So I'm always reflective and thinking about my past experiences and incorporating principles in the Bible and all of that. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, because I think what stood out the most was my identity in Christ, and that that's it in a nutshell. And I think sometimes we have to be reminded, because there are so many things that we encounter in this world and so many life experiences that will try to alter our identity, and being able to come back to the foundation. And the foundation being, I was created in the image of Christ. I think that's a game changer. No matter what circumstances you're faced with, no matter whether you're, entering a new job, a new task, transitioning from high school to college, whatever the role is that when you go back to the basics, as they would say, it just kind of gives you that resolve that, this too shall pass. When I'm weak, he is strong. I can do all things through Christ that strengthens me. And so those are definitely the anchors for me in maintaining that relationship with God and my faith, and the role that mental wellness plays in me being able to use his word to affirm those things as it relates to who I am and who he's called me to be and who he's created me to be. I love that.
And, while we're talking about faith here, I was listening to one of your shows, and I took notes, and you mentioned the enemy isn't playing games, and neither should we. Wow. And I think about that for the imposter syndrome. And here's why. If we're talking about this in a spiritual sense, I believe that the enemy's voice is that inner disruptor that shows up when we're doing something great. Okay. So, if we're talking in secular terms, we call it imposter syndrome. But if we're talking in spiritual terms, that's simply the enemy trying to dissuade you from doing God's work. Absolutely. That's how I see it. And so that's why it does show up when you're doing great things. And when you're not doing great things, it takes a back seat, because it's like, well, I don't have anything to move them away from, so let me chill out.
Right. They're no threat. Yeah.
They're no threat, right? And so I think it's the enemy showing up and trying to convince you that you are less than. And it's up to us to say, move aside. I got this. Right. So that's why I always say that, that inner disruptor, or that inner voice, or that imposter syndrome shows up when you are doing something great. And that's what the enemy does. It tries to push you away from doing something great. So I just wanted to throw that in. And so when you said the enemy isn't playing games, that shows me the action, isn't playing games. So it's going to take action to dissuade you from doing great things. So neither should we. We shouldn't play games either. When that imposter syndrome shows up, we should take action in telling it, I got this, move aside.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
I love that. I love that, because it is so true. And I love the fact that, because, honestly, we hear it all the time. If you're not doing anything for Christ, then, or you're not doing anything as it relates to what he's called you to do, your destiny, your purpose, then, the enemy's not going to be bothering you. And I think a lot of times we get, we're like, oh my gosh, things are coming at me left and right, and woe is me. And I get it, because I've been there and I've said it as well. But I think, the whole bit of this conversation is the most important part is recognition. And I think when you recognize what that negative self-talk is about, how it's misleading, understand that you're created whole. I love that. Tap into what's within. Then you can definitely navigate it, and with all confidence and boldness say, I've got this, because he the creator of the universe, the creator of you and I, who ordained our steps from the beginning of time.
Right.
He's got this. I mean, he gets the final say. And so just being able to recondition your thoughts and how you articulate that on a day-to-day basis to yourself makes a world of difference. It really does make a world of difference.
Yeah, I hear that.
Wow. So every time we give into our inner imposter lies, we lose our ability to fulfill our highest potential. And we've talked about that so much. And I just pray that everyone listening, like you said, it comes in different shapes, forms. We call it negative self-talk. We call it all these different things. But at the end of the day, as long as you can recognize it, no matter what it is that you call it, and you can be in a position to defend what is rightfully yours.
Because the goal is to not have any regrets, right? We don't want to live with regrets. Like when I look in hindsight of my experience as a graduate student, I'm like, gosh, I had so much amazing stuff to share, but I'd never shared it. So my goal for your audience is just don't have any regrets. So do what it takes to not have any regrets. If you're anxious about doing something, just do it anyway. Right?
Yes.
Do it scared. Do it while you're afraid. And you won't have any regrets.
I love that. Yeah, we want to leave this earth empty. That's what we want to do. And we don't want to have, any regrets. And I think that is truly walking in faith. One of my things is, wherever you lead, I will follow. And I feel like, I mean, if that's where he's going, then I can't end up on the wrong side of things. Exactly. I just can't, because that's not who he is. So, of course, at the end of each episode, thank you so much for sharing your time. I mean, it's just really, truly been amazing.
Yeah, it was fun.
I love it. I love it. At the end of each episode, we share 3 shift points that we can put into action today. And so I would like for you to provide those 3 shift points for our audience to help them put into action today to combat imposter syndrome experience, however you want to phrase it.
Yeah. And I kind of mentioned them already, but I just want to emphasize, if you're anxious, just do it anyway. I mean, just do it so that you won't have those regrets, and stay committed. That goes along the same lines as do it anyway, but just stay committed to what you're doing. People are so afraid of failure, but I like to tell people, look, if you failed, that's wonderful, because failure is the classroom for success. Yes. Failure teaches you what you need for your next steps to do it better. Failure is such a necessary part of your success. If you're not failing, then how are you learning, right? So when you fail, applaud yourself, take the learning lessons, and keep going. Stay committed to what you want to do so that you won't live with any regrets. I also encourage folks to seek coaching. Like, I'm a big advocate of coaching. If you truly, truly feel stuck and not clear, and you just need that hands-on support to get you moving past the imposter syndrome, make sure you reach out to a coach. They will walk you through that process of getting clear, setting some action steps for yourself, and feeling so much better about what you can do to overcome this experience. And as we talked about, as we kind of dissected the science of how imposter syndrome shows up, I would say just keep in mind this understanding, this knowledge of why imposter syndrome shows up, because it simply is a byproduct of your survival instinct. It'll show up when you're doing amazing things. And so being able to identify it, recognize it, show compassion and to yourself, and be kind to yourself, and respond versus react, as you said, Marsha, I think those are key things to really have control over it so that it won't control you.
Amen. So that it won't control you.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a powerful statement.
Yeah.
In so many ways, man. So it will not. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you would love to say before we close that out? I tell you, this has been an amazing conversation, and I pray that that it will shed new light as we walk through this journey, because it is one of those things that, I think it is a constant for many. And is there anything else that you'd love to share? I mean, it's just been so full.
Yeah, I would just say, take ownership of your own experience, right?
Yeah.
And I certainly have a resource that's coming out on November 2020 for pre-order on Amazon. I have a book called Capable Beyond Measure. So it helps you understand the imposter experience and, get strategies to overcome the experience, right? So for those who are like fed up with this tight grip, fear and self-doubt has in your life, make sure you just check out the book. It really dissects imposter syndrome and helps you create this master plan to overcome it. So I'm really excited about that.
Sounds exciting. I cannot wait. Wait. Now, if we want to connect with you, how do we do so?
Sure. I'm on Twitter and Instagram. My handle is Ijeoma Leads. And then my website for free downloads or free resources is ijeomanwaogu.com.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm all about personal growth. And I think all resources that are available, I think that we do ourselves a disservice when we don't take responsibility, like you said, for our own actions and just maintain and just download those free resources. I love that. I mean, I think you can never have enough and being able to have those strategies and those tools to put in your toolbox, to be able to combat anything that the enemy may throw at your way.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to just say thank you. I love the conversation. I appreciate the chat. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for joining the show. I'm always grateful that God will just send amazing people my way to share the mic with, because at the end of the day, it's really all about helping each other. And thank you so much for sharing your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Until next time, thanks for listening in. Know this, you can rise from anything. It's never too late. You're not stuck. You have choices. You can think new thoughts. You can learn something new. You can create new habits. Most importantly, if God is for you, who can be against you? All that matters is that you decide today to shift. The SheShifted podcast was co-produced in part by Paradox East. Until next time, I'm your grateful host, Marsha Gill, and let's get to it.